I'd been looking for a part like this for years, and it was one where it's a female character who is fiercely devoted to what she does, but at the same time it explored the fuller sense of her life, and it was that combination, and there was so much humor in the screenplay as well, which is it's a wonderful way to tell Ruth and Marty's story. It's a film about someone who is incredibly determined, who the forces of society are against her. A lot of the time, she's a woman who's ahead of her time. She's someone who constantly found that the stuff wasn't happening in the way it should be, and it was as though she was 20 years ahead of the time that she was in. And it's a very true portrait of her working life and her family life. We first find Ruth when she is going into Harvard University, and she was one of 9 women who was attending Harvard at that time. And one of the opening scenes is Ruth just sitting in a sea of dudes. There are a lot of guys around, and it's at the beginning of her journey to being a lawyer, with many obstacles along the way. The film explores very truthfully a relationship that was very supportive. They were both, Ruth and Marty, were incredibly devoted to their careers, and almost to the point where the work life, there wasn't that separation. Their work was their life. In many ways, it was something they were so passionate about. And when they were in their 20s and they'd had Jane, Marty became very sick, and he was diagnosed with cancer. And we see that in the film, and we see them overcoming that, and as a couple triumphing over some pretty difficult situations. Research, when you're playing a real person, it comes with an enormous responsibility to understand who that person is, why they behave like they behave, but also, on a more minute level, do they wear nail varnish, and what time do they get up in the morning, and all those little details that in some ways the most fun in playing a real person, because you become like a forensic scientist. And I was very fortunate to meet Justice Ginsburg, and we met at her apartment in Washington, and it was a very moving encounter with her, having read everything there was to know about someone, and then meeting them, and then being slightly speechless when you first meet them. I suddenly became very shy, actually, and feel just great respect for her. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a true revolutionary. She has a fire in her belly, but her skill is in changing the law bit by bit, and changing society's perception of the law so that great changes could happen. And it came from Ruth very painstakingly going through and just case by case showing that discriminating on the basis of gender was in no way a sensible thing, and that had to change. But the painstaking work and the method she took to do this is awe-inspiring. In terms of the case that we're looking at in the film, which is about Charles Moritz and his situation was that he was caring for his mother, and he was at the same time working very hard and often away from home. And he looked to get a tax deduction because he employed someone to help him, a nurse to help him with the day-to-day, difficulties of looking after someone. And he was told because he was a man and he was a single man, he wasn't allowed to have this deduction. And so Ruth saw something in Charles Moritz that resonated with her. She had also had her mother had been very ill when she was growing up. Her mother had died when she was very young, so I feel as though there was a deep connection with Charles Moritz in the sense that she knew what he was going through. She knew what it was like to care for someone. It was a partnership in the sense that they took it in turns. If one had a big brief that they were doing that evening, then the other would cook and take responsibility for that. And they didn't limit themselves by being these conventional 50s man and, husband and wife, man and woman. And they were throwing all of that up in the air and going, no, that doesn't work for us. Jane and Ruth. Jane is the means with which Ruth understands how America is changing. And that is a huge theme in the film. It's about the state of America. It's about America at that time needing to shift and needing to adapt itself to a shifting generation. And you see that very much in the difference between Ruth's coming from the 1940s, 1950s, and then she looks at her daughter who's the product of the 60s and 70s, and she's going, hold on, society's moved on, but the law isn't reflecting that, and the law's got to catch up. And through that, through that sort of legal context, we also understand this beautiful relationship between a mother and daughter that has its tensions and difficulties, but is a very special relationship. Initially, it's very broad and discussions, ideas about accent, approach, hair, makeup. How do we show Ruth shifting and changing? We wanted to be very true to the Ruth that we found in the photographs, and I have pored over those photographs so much, and anything, any sort of detail that we could find about her, we wanted it to be in the film. We wanted it to be very, very true to her, because often with filmmaking, the more true you are to the subject, if you're telling a real story, then the more beautiful it is, because the specificity is what makes something so truthful and therefore enjoyable to watch. I feel with Mimi there's an openness to collaborate, which is so extraordinary. She is someone who leads very effectively and keeps everyone together, keeps everyone united, but also at the same time lets it breathe, lets people have their own ideas, opinions, throw things in, try things out, make some mistakes along the way, but it's, but we're the focus is on telling this story.
Hey guys, here's today's daily fact. Now, the Tin Man's makeup nearly killed him in The Wizard of Oz. That's right, Buddy Ebsen, who played the Tin Man in the classic film, was nearly killed by the aluminum-based makeup he wore for his role. According to his autobiography, he suffered debilitating symptoms including his fingers and toes curling and stiffening, and his knees bending the wrong way, and an inability to breathe. Now remember to click here below to subscribe, or on the side for more great content.